Hi, I'm Mary Thengvall, Community Builder with Chef, and I'm here at ChefConf 2015. I'm interviewing J. Paul Reed, co-host of The Ship Show and DevOps Consultant. Hi.
Hi.
Welcome.
Thanks.
How you doing?
Thanks for having me. I'm doing well. How are you?
Good. Doing well. Doing well. It's been a great day.
Yes, it has.
How has ChefConf been for you?
It's been awesome. I mean, ChefConf is always awesome, and we use that word, I think, a lot, awesome, but it really is, and I think it's awesome in a lot of different ways. I think one of the things that I was most excited to hear about was the big announcement around Chef Delivery,
right.
the Chef Delivery product. I know a lot of people have been working on that for a long time. I'd heard murmurings at various, chef events, chef summit, and that sort of thing.
I've been saying it's the worst, best kept secret.
Yeah, well, the community's kind of been buzzing around it for a while, and I think it fills a need
right
in the industry, so that's super important. The demo of deploying the site live was awesome. I know Chris Webber was in back sweating bullets trying to make that work, but he said worked fine. Didn't
Everything
really have
went well.
went well. So that's awesome. I think one of the other interesting things, it's starting to spur a lot of conversations around that continuous delivery pipeline, what that looks like, what it should look like. And I had a very interesting conversation with Adam Jacob in one of the talks afterwards, or at one of the end of the presentations, and we were talking about delivery, and somebody had asked me what I thought of the kind of prescriptive nature of Chef Delivery, the fact that it sort of says, here's the pipeline, this is what it looks like, this is what you should do. And so I had thoughts and feels, so I started speaking, and then Adam kind of comes up from the side, and he's like, well, let me tell you why I thought that. And so what's interesting about that is we had a great conversation about the fact that it was sort of prescriptive on purpose.
Right.
And he, in developing the product with the team, comes from a lot of experience of him and Chef working with lots of different companies.
Right.
And he had said that, this is the part I thought was key, is that he made the prescriptive nature of Chef Delivery, he made that decision on purpose.
Right.
And it had to do with organizational psychology. And of course, this is Adam, so he'll pontificate about this stuff, which is great. It's great.
Right.
And he was saying the problem was, he has a saying, he's like, when talking about version control, he's like, unless you know and you have sort of experts on your team, just use Git. Just use Git, right? And of course, version control is a topic near and dear to my heart.
Absolutely.
As Ship Show listeners know. So, we like to go back and forth about that. But the point and the analogy that I was making is that with Chef Delivery, he's like, this is the pipeline, just use it. And when you have the mind shift of using it and seeing what it's like, then you can customize it to your own product. But you need to sort of have almost that slap in the face of, this is what continuous delivery looks like at its core, and it's going to change the way you work. And I do a lot of consulting with clients. He was basically saying it gets you over that hurdle of, well, we can't do that. Jez Humble was talking about continuous delivery, we can't do that, all of the excuses. If you basically say, like, just use Git, don't ask questions, just use Chef Delivery, don't ask questions.
It solves so many of those problems.
Right. And a lot of people were asking, well, how can I integrate these things and whatever, and I know they're already talking about plug-in points and things for like if you already use GitHub and you don't want to use the Chef Delivery backed source control part of it, how they can do all those integrations. So I know that they're planning for Chef customers to integrate their own needs into what that pipeline looks like, but after they have had an experience with what an actual continuous delivery pipeline looks like, because so many people are like, I don't know what that looks like. Help me figure that out.
Well, and that's one of the cool things that I love about it's open source, like everything else with Chef. And so, you can plug in different pieces. You can make it fit your product and your exact need, rather than us just saying, well, here's delivery and it's prescriptive and you have to use it this way. So, and I think that's been one really cool thing that I've heard a lot of people talking about, is like, well, it fits in with everything else because we can just, it's plug and play, right?
Well,
so it works really well.
And I think that's going to spur a lot of conversations.
Absolutely.
And I find a lot of people sometimes they're asking you. I had a conversation with a client recently. They wanted the DevOps best practices and manifesto, and I was like, about that, let's have a conversation, right? But a lot of times they want a playbook. Again, it's that they don't know what it looks like. So they need something that's not a toy project, that is their project, but in a new model that they need to seriously consider moving to. So I think Chef Delivery is going to help with that. Super excited about that product, where it's going.
Right.
I went to the actually extra talk after the keynote, the presentation about it, and we got to see some new features. Did a kind of a test deploy there.
Fantastic.
So I'm super excited about that.
Great, great. Something else that's been a hot topic has been where DevOps started, where it's going, how it changed, things that people predicted about it that they didn't expect, and stuff like that. I'd love to get your thoughts on what predictions of yours you had that either came true or didn't, or how it's been different than you expected.
Well, so I think Adam's keynote today about finding your own DevOps, I think, we're 5 years in,
right?
Patrick Dubois, and we had that whole celebration kind of in Ghent last October. So I think a lot of people are asking, okay, we're 5 years in, what do the next 5 years look like? And you're starting to see, I don't want to say a divergence because that sounds worse than I mean it, but you're finding the people that are like, kind of, this is the prescriptive nature, right, of DevOps. This is what you need to do. Yeah. And then you're finding the people like Adam, they're saying, it's going to look different for everyone. You need to figure out how to find out what it is for you. And that's those are very different models. Yeah. So it's I think interesting to see kind of that debate and discussion going on.
Definitely.
I think that's actually something new within the last 5 years. I do think that certainly the learning how to learn is going to have more value than I read it out of a manifesto if we had one or something like that. I think Agile and their experience, that community's experience with how it got implemented. People always make fun of ITIL, and then that we make fun of Agile sometimes because it's like, oh, the joke about water scrum fall, right? That is the risk I think we run into if we just start saying, well, listen to these 10 people and what they say. And I've had this experience where people get a little frustrated because they're like, tell us what to do. And I'm like, no, I want you to know, because you run into this with clients all the time where they're like, what do we do? What does continuous delivery look like? What does DevOps look like? And the thing I always say is, you are the only one that knows your product. You are the experts, the only experts on the planet in your market and your product. And so I can't help you with that. And with certain clients and customers, and I'm sure Adam's had this conversation, they're like, what?
How do I handle that?
I thought you were just going to give us the checklist and we would be successful. I find that, that's good. And it's interesting, there's that dichotomy I was saying about being prescriptive is not bad, and yet we were just talking about how Chef Delivery is very prescriptive. The value there of that, though, is that's a product that, again, the thing I said to Adam, and he kind of laughed at it, was it's slapping people in the face. This is what it looks like, right? In the same way we had to shift from like SVN, CVS to Git, totally different model. It was kind of like, burn the world down and look at this
and
in a
look
small
at it
control,
in a different way,
and then build it back up, and that's where the learning part comes in. And so if you go and burn the world down, and then you haven't learned how to like rebuild the thing, it's bad. It's gonna be bad times for you.
Absolutely. But I think that's part of what I love about, Adam got up on stage and was like, look, I said people with DevOps in their title, that shouldn't be a thing, and this shouldn't be a thing, and like talking through some of those preconceived ideas of like, no, someone who's a DevOps engineer, that's not the right title for them. And realizing now that like, okay, like that's not what we thought it should be, but if that's getting across the culture change and the implementation that you need in your company, that is absolutely the right title for you, and that's what you should be doing.
Well, so it's interesting, we talk a lot about empathy, we talk a lot about culture, and the kind of underpinnings of that, which a lot of people in DevOps days and talks look at, but it's not as forefront of mind as I think it sometimes should be, is there's psychology, there's sociology, those sorts of things. And that is where I think it can be a little different, because again, we're thinking about the organizational psychology, and the ability to say I was wrong in my prediction. Adam tells a great story where he's like, I told this one company to do this thing. I said this thing. Told another company, same thing. This company failed, this company's successful. Why, right? I think when you've got people that are talking and having these conversations and they are sort of self-aware enough to ask that question, super important.
Yeah, definitely. Speaking of empathy, that's been a topic on a lot of people's minds lately as well. Nicole mentioned it this morning in her keynote. I know there was a conversation about it yesterday here in the booth. It came up at the Community Summit on Tuesday. There's been a lot of blog posts, a lot of movement towards, make sure you're taking care of yourself. Make sure that you're actually using the fact that DevOps allows you to not be doing so many things, to take that time back and make sure that your priorities are right as far as work and family and personal life and all of those things go. Seems like that's something that's coming up a lot in the tech industry in particular.
Yeah, so I think certainly within DevOps, this concept of burnout and has sort of been an undercurrent. People have been sort of thinking about it. I think that's part of empathy, not working your people to death.
Yes.
And it's a lot of people think, well, it's a cultural or how you treat your employees issue. And I think people like John Allspaw and other people in that space that are talking about this is actually, no, the science shows you from a cognitive perspective there are better outcomes when you don't run your people at 100%.
Definitely.
What I've noticed, and there's been more direct talk about burnout, what I'm a little worried about, I think in the last couple of months there have been some events that have happened within the community. John Willis did a really big blog post, and I'm going to butcher the Japanese word, but it was Kuro Jiatsu?
I think so.
Yeah, something like that. But it's the Japanese concept of, working yourself to death.
Right.
And I know, there's, from time to time, there's been a big talk about, and actually Japanese culture, about their work culture and how it's different from ours and how that can be a problem because there's a very interesting honor component in their society that I think we as a tribe of DevOps or ops people often include that in our identity, right? So we identify with that.
Yeah.
But there's been events on Twitter of people tweeting their thoughts and feels, and other people calling 911, and that's kind of a very public way to do that. And it's worrying me because I'm in a couple of ways. One, I'm kind of wondering, is there something going on in the industry where around funding or the way we're managing things or whatever, such that people are working their teams harder? I actually have a couple of friends that half the company recently got laid off,
right?
And it had to do with getting the next round of funding, and so they worked them really hard until they laid them all off, right? And so, point being, I think in the last month to 2 months, we're seeing a lot of people, friends and colleagues that I respect and admire. They're talking about burnout in ways I never thought they would be talking about it. They're not talking about it as it's a thing. They're talking about it as I am burnt out.
It's a thing for me.
Right. And I am worried about that because John's post was very personal. And in fact, we talked about this. I remember over lunch, and we were talking about, it took me 3 tries to get through that post.
Yeah.
I just, and
it was hard to read.
Right. Yeah. And that's really important. But his solution of letting people know, you can DM me, you can email me. A lot of people came out and said the same thing.
Right.
And I'm the same way. You can always DM me and email me and call me. But the problem is, no matter how many people do that, it doesn't scale, right? And so there's this thing about, it's important that exists as a thing. It's important that we are exploring how we can do that, especially with people that are close to us, and make that known. You can talk to me, and that's fine. But I think there's a more systemic solution or set of solutions that we need to start looking at and having a conversation about. And this is not just a problem here. I mean, this is the Germanwings crash and the co-pilot depression, the issues there. We're starting to talk about this, and unfortunately, the media has started talking about it. Well, this person with depression, and maybe they shouldn't be involved at all, or
which isn't the right way to approach it either.
The behavior, and somebody, a lot of people pointing out, if you knew how many people you rely on every single day with depression, it kind of reminds me, actually kind of reminds me of that Fight Club quote where it's like, we are your ambulance drivers, we are,
absolutely,
do not mess with us, and here the message is, I think, we need as a community some help. And so one of the things, you and I had talked about this, and I think this is very interesting. I started talking about this 4-hour decompress process. And that was something that it's kind of one of these, it's so simple, it's stupid, really. But because you were talking about the amount of work that you have going on, and also just that you're traveling a lot, it's just, you're juggling a lot, right?
And being able to take that time to work on work things, but be able to think ahead and not just focus on this is what I have to do today.
Right. And that gives you that 4-hour decompress process, gives you the time and space to do that. And it's sort of, it's weird in that it's a structured thing.
Right.
And I have a blog post on it. We can link in the notes or whatever to what that is. But it's a structured thing. So it's not just like go out and mess around.
Right.
But it's supposed to provide some value and get people to have some space to not only let their mind wander for their company, but let them sort of repair, rejuvenate on their own. But do that in a identifiable, sustainable way.
Right.
I don't know that that's going to be the solution. I know when you and I talked about it, it was in the context of, you're a community manager. So, you talk about empathy, events like this. I'm an introvert, so it's like, if you're on and you're talking to people and you're trying to be empathetic and be in the moment and there with people, I don't know about you, but after ChefConf, I'm drained in a good way. But I am drained.
Right, absolutely.
And so, I know our conversation was focused around like, how can you actually make the argument to your manager? This time is actually, it's not just about preventing burnout for me, but it's actually going to get you maybe that next idea for facilitating community, or for maybe explaining for me, maybe it's explaining DevOps in a better way to a client, right?
Well, and I think that was one of the keys was, it allows me to take a step back and look at the picture as a whole, rather than just focusing on, okay, who's the person I need to talk to next, or I need to answer these emails. And those interactions are fantastic, and I love that part of my job. But being able to take that time to, the first hour, set some time aside for myself and kind of, go for a walk on the beach, go for a hike, do something. In the second hour, take a step back, okay, here's a book that I'm reading through, or a blog post that I've been wanting to read, or something that I've been wanting to dig into a little bit more. And then taking those last 2 hours to kind of brainstorm and think through, like, okay, here's the bigger picture. How can I better serve my community? What can we be doing differently that would be a better representation? How can we do these things in a slightly different way, and kind of allowing myself to take the time to think through that process and come up with different ideas and different ways to do things than we might have tried before.
So I like to describe it as flow and synthesis. The point of it is you want to get into flow, cognitive flow, and you want to be able to do something that creates synthesis between disparate ideas, different ideas and things that you're thinking about, problems you're wrestling with. The analogy I made, I'll let a lot of people giggle at this, but we always talk about, oh, I fixed that bug in the shower, or I came up with that lightning talk idea in the shower. We're not going to take a 4-hour shower, hopefully. Not in California.
No, not
with the water problems, but you want to try to recreate that. And it's notable that there's a full hour at the beginning and an hour at the end to kind of extricate yourself from the forest, if you like that metaphor, or if you like the 10,000 feet, 40,000 feet metaphor, to climb, right? But similarly, when you need to come back, you don't want to jump in that hot tub, right? Nobody does that, right? That's not good for you, right? So there's space in there to sort of reflect, record what you did so that there's some utility to it. And then you can rejoin society or in your own way, at a way that's not jarring. And so one interesting thing I'll say about that, and we were talking about this, like how can you get your manager to sort of, because it's like, this is something really you should put on the calendar. We were talking about, once a week, but even if you do it every other week, right, and you do the math on that, it's 4 hours. We're talking in 2 weeks, that's 5% of your time. Now, you might ask yourself, if you are in an environment where they're unwilling to give you 5% time, again, this is not about screwing around, it's about actually thinking about your company, your organization, your personal problems in a different way to sort of figure out solutions. If they're not willing to give you 5%, that implies that they're running you at close to 100%, which implies a whole host of red flags. It really
things that you need to bring up with your manager in addition to the I need to take this time every week.
So like I said, this is something that I've told a few people. We talked about it. I've like I said, it's kind of stupid simple. I would love to improve it as a process. I hope it is helpful. But I think from a systemic point of view, we need to also include, in addition to DMing John Willis or giving me an email or a phone call, which again, super important, critical, and also that is the foundation of community. Is when people offer that and people make use of that. So that's important. but it's at that tail end. We kind of need to think about what it looks like.
How to head it off at the pass rather than waiting till it's already. Yeah, exactly.
And maybe this is a solution, maybe it's not, but let's find out in sort of that constant improvement sort of way.
Absolutely.
Let's experiment and see, maybe it is as simple as that.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think part of that is just, continuing to spread that word and continuing to get the idea out there of, like, let's rethink our priorities. Let's figure out where we need to restructure. And burnout's a thing.
Right.
I know Burnout.io has been getting a lot of attention lately, and that's really exciting to me. It's a resource page that kind of walks through some of what burnout is, has resources and links to books and everything else. There's a book I've been reading lately called Overwhelmed that has a ton of great research and walks through a lot of the same things, like make sure you're doing these things, but also goes back and talks through some of the companies that are doing it right and gives examples of ways that we can do it. And I think that's part of what I'm looking at the future of DevOps and hoping that it's going to bring is this shift in not just the dev and the ops, but the company culture as a whole.
A more sustainable model.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And it's funny you mentioned that. We were talking about DevOps and Nicole, and she's awesome. I love that she's like, you're doing and saying a lot of things, but there's science about why we do those things.
Absolutely.
It's not right. And so you were talking about companies with metrics and psychologists doing studies, cognitive research, right? I think that's actually, unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, that's where we're going to have to focus the argument. Yeah. That it's science telling us this, not, I have a friend who says it's nice to be nice.
Absolutely.
It is nice to be nice, but it turns out in a business context, that's not the only reason to be nice.
Right.
It gets you better outcomes.
Definitely.
It gets you more sustainable workforce in terms of resiliency in the workforce itself.
Yep.
And it's better business outcomes.
Yeah.
They're more creative.
And we have the data to prove it.
Yep. Yep. Yeah.
All right, cool. Well, thanks so much for stopping by and talking to me this afternoon.
Thanks for having
me. This was great.
Yeah.
Enjoy the rest of ChefConf.
Will do.
Thanks.
See you.